Take two.
Take two.
Of season 2.
Yes, season 2. Welcome, Mark. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. Ora, nice to see you. This is our first episode for the second season of Saints and Sinners.
Yes.
And last time we weren't together. We were on that thing called Zoom.
Yes.
You're up in the Drakensberg.
Yes.
And what's it like? Now you're back in civilization.
It feels like I've been back forever already. You know that feeling? I got back for 2 days. I wanted to go back there, but except I couldn't afford it because obviously there's no cash. But no, it is lovely to be back. I really enjoyed my time away, but I'm good. I'm very glad to be back actually, because there's a season for everything. I think.
Now we have mentioned this in season 1, but we may get some new listeners. Just over a year ago, you were at the...
It used to be called the Grahamstown National Arts Festival. Now it's called the Makanda Arts Festival. But it's the same festival.
Yes.
Except this year we didn't have it, or we had it... Actually, it was done online. So a lot of the shows were presented online, so we had to film those, and I did that.
Like the rest of the world?
Yes,
online.
we're filming, living online.
But you were there just the year before, and your house burnt down.
Yes, while we were there, yes. In the final days of the festival, and we finished up the festival. Shame my daughter was here. Basically all she had to her name was her pajamas. Everything was lost, but luckily my brother was here, and we headed back a day and a half later to start again, really, with everything gone.
So now you're back. Your house has been rebuilt while you were up in the Berg and staying around. I mean, it's taken a year, really, to get back to being back.
Yes, that's right.
And being back is just back to back. I mean, it's just normal. Everything is just hunky-dory.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know what all these people are complaining about. I mean, get over it. I mean, obviously not everyone has the good fortune of being an actor at this time.
Yes.
When people just are lining up generally to say, how can we help you?
Yeah.
Can we come and see a show? We just want to pay you. So that's what we've found. I can't believe that people have struggled during this time when we have just had plain sailing the whole time. Well,
I think like everybody, I think there's... we were all quite relieved to see 2019 go back, and we all had this.
You mean pass? Yeah, pass.
Yes. And then 2020, we had this whole new motivation, and then around about the 24th of March, this Chinese.
Oh, please don't go there. How's Malena?
My wife said to me, "Be very nice today. Don't say anything controversial." But listen. We got this disease, we got this virus, the world has been on its head. You were in isolation much of the time, especially in the first part up in the Drakensberg. You're back now. And there's just this hangover because we kind of think we almost normal again because to some degree we in level 1 of lockdown.
Yeah.
But there's nothing normal.
Well, I get these guys who talk about school. Have you ever had them? Hey, remember when we were at school and then we did that and I had a 6-pack and you remember the guy and you were like, you never had a 6-pack, pal. I don't know what you're dreaming. So, was it ever that good? Yes. Okay, there were some good elements, but we cherry pick about what's good, Yeah,
our brains have an incredible ability as we look back over we talk about the good old days, which,
in South Africa, I mean, let's be real.
Well, exactly, and even if we take out the normal political elements to that statement, we do have the ability to filter our minds.
Yes.
What was good and what wasn't so great.
Yes, that's right.
But I think today we want to just talk a little bit today. I think as we were kind of actually connecting, maybe we had one little coffee before this gathering.
Yes.
And just to talk a little bit about the sort of whole PST, post-traumatic PTS. So listen, I've got a bit dyslexic.
Dyslexics rule.
I mean, PDS really is a clinical term and we're not clinical termers.
Wow. Some people, did you finish school? Where did you go to school again?
That's the good part.
Hey, where did you go to school?
Almost like Port Shepstone, but it was...
Newcastle, was it?
Escort.
No, same thing, really.
Hold on to it. But let's face it, how are you kind of processing just the last 6 months really, because that's how long this
Yes.
process has gone.
7 months.
You, as you began to say, you are in the entertainment industry, and I'm also in the entertainment industry, but not in the sense that we rely on public gatherings.
Yes.
That's, in your case, much more than in my case, your primary source of revenue and living.
Yes.
So there's a lot that I know that you and Lisa have had to process. Your kids were at varsity, they're at home. You're in a new house after this traumatic experience of losing everything.
Yes.
I mean, the other day you were telling me that you are well known at home affairs.
I am well known there. People know me by first name, literally. I've spent so much time there because I've also been through adoption as well. And then they had the misfortune of losing all my documentation. Not me, but I had to start reading.
So your documentation got burnt?
No. This is the last time. But before that, when you
applied.
I applied again. I spent a long time. Then waited, went back. They said they don't have any record of that. I had to start again the process.
Yeah.
So I just had so much fun there. But
is that stressful?
It is. It is stressful, but it's only stressful the first 27 times, and then after that, you do get used to dealing with stuff. And in the midst of it, you learn to appreciate small things. And I think that if there's one thing that the last 7 months has taught me is there are seasons where things are challenging, but you can still appreciate stuff. And because if you don't, it's not just for other people, it's for me. If I don't start with an appreciative mindset, things go wrong. They go from bad to worse. Whereas an appreciation, a gratitude changes literally the way I see the world, the light, the people, the expressions. If you start with that in mind, it actually changes how I see the world, and it changes my response to that, which then actually changes the world. And I think it's vital if we're going to live any sort of a life worth living.
Don't you find that there's this tension between the reality of what I'm experiencing, and when I look at some of the things that the last 7 months have been to me, other than the fact that my role has changed, my life has changed, which has nothing to do with COVID. Now you add COVID into this mix, and the normal stresses, the normal things that you'd have in any form of life, is compounded by this COVID thing and by isolation and the threat of this virus, and people we know who know people whose family have died through this disease.
Yes.
I mean, your father-in-law has passed away through this whole time.
Yes.
All the compounding impact, and like you say, there are these moments. But to be honest with you, I found that it's been really difficult sometimes to have the Pollyanna thing, to find those moments where everything's going to turn out fine and everything's going to be joyful. And
of course.
And all of that. I mean, how have you kind of lived in that space?
Yes, it's like, I think that to think about your thinking, so if I'm in a bad mood, which I have been, actually had this conversation with my kids yesterday. My son told me in no uncertain terms how grumpy I was. And I said, well, you make me grumpy. Just by saying that, you're not helping me be in my grumpiness, and so on. And yet, when you start thinking about how you're thinking, that's a good start for me. So I'm addicted to my own way of doing things, and that has been a major challenge for me. So all the things I thought were just add-ons to my life, my career, going to work, not seeing the kids all day, blah, 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 then suddenly I'm forced out of my comfort zone. Then I realize that a lot of who I think I am is tied up to what I used to do. And now I have to reassess who I am in the world, because I thought I was this independent thinker, fairly clever guy, or whatever. I'm not clever, but in my own way. And then what happens is that you're faced with the reality that actually once you're taken out of your comfort zone, all those things seem pretty flimsy.
Dudley Thompson used to have a glass with water in it, and he says, we don't know what's in us until you shake the glass.
Yes.
And the glass has been shaken. I mean, stuff has emerged that in one sense is quite encouraging, because you do find faith, you do find endurance and this ability to adapt. And I've been amazed, even in as I watched you and Lisa. You've adapted in certain ways. You've taken Bruce and Charmaine just to a whole different level. And in our context, in the church context, the guys at Grace have had to pivot, and they've had to change the way that they express church. So those have been some of the upsides. The fact that it's there, it's resident within inside of us. Would we have done some of the stuff that we've done, that has been creative, that has been meaningful, had this not happened?
I often think, is it possible to change without these dynamics? It's uncomfortable. We see the potential disaster. We see the division. We see people angry about a lot of different causes. And in fact, if you're not part of a cause at the moment, people will say, well, are you crazy? You need to choose a side here. Choose the right side. And so wisdom is needed. But I do think that in order for us to change, it is exactly that it doesn't come voluntarily. Often it's God's grace that actually moves in, and we say, well, I don't really care about your comfort right now because I care about the long-term prospects. What I'm doing is about eternity and so on. And I love you, and this is part of love. I'll be with you in this thing. It's a fire. Let's go. But I say that not because I want it. I want to make that very clear right now. I didn't put my hand up for that. But that's why I'm not in charge, thank goodness. Because, the path of least resistance often is the one I want to go on. And yet we see in the world where that leads us. It's not great. So I hold those things in tension. At the same time, I have a lot of sympathy for someone who comes and says, I'm really not coping. And I'll say, well, yeah, welcome to my side. There's at least once every week I'm not coping. People say, how are you doing? I say, would you like an inventory? An hour ago I wanted to, I wanted to actually run out of the house, but now I'm fine. And so it's not, are you going to crack? It's almost a question of when, and then what are you going to do? What are you going to do once you get to those pivotal moments? I think that's where I'm at and where I've been at for a while.
There's a couple of verses that kind of spring to mind. There's one in the book of Peter that says that the trial of your patience will prove more precious than gold. And I remember saying to people, would you like a kilogram of gold or a kilogram of trials? Because the Bible says that the trial of your faith will prove more precious than gold. So the value of this whole idea of being in the cauldron, being under pressure, and something else coming out of you that is more valuable, hopefully, as faith. I think of the scripture in Romans 5 where he talks about the trial of your faith will produce character. Yes. And I know there have been certain times in my life, and this has been one of them, where I say, Lord, how much character do you want me to have?
Yes.
How much more of this stress do you want me to carry in terms of that? And the margins are very narrow,
I made a joke earlier about my son telling me that I'm a grumpy.
Yeah.
Dad, no one wants to talk to you, he says. Every time we talk to you, all you talk about is the dishes, he said. Not doing the dishes. And then I proceeded to tell him that he hasn't got any clue or what I am dealing with on behalf of our family, And I thought it was completely justified in that. And it's all true. You're not really aware of that, and neither are your kids. But when I left that conversation, and 5 minutes later, I realized that he was right, that I was grumpy all the time. And he was just acknowledging the truth. I was also acknowledging the truth, but how was that helping at all?
Yeah.
And I think the point is that what do we do with, how often do I feel I don't even like who I am, Right. So often, I can't tell you. I said, how did I become this prat, How did I become this, actually, excuse me, but an asshole?
Asshole.
I want to say that out loud. I say,
yes.
I've often heard Mark say, if people knew what I was like away from the pulpit and that, they would be more dubious about listening to what I said on Sunday.
I've never said that.
I've got to know you, and I can tell you that is true. But yet, I think that is a true reflection. And I prayer for me, it's amazing how my prayer life and my fuse have some sort of relationship. Because I suddenly realized that when my fuse is short, I go back and say, have I been spending any time really in prayer besides grace and besides the thing and, slightly ceremonial, but have I been just chatting to God about what's going on, or digging? Let's just say digging, because I heard Dallas Willard say that prayer is really when we talk to God about what we are doing together. And this idea of together, that we're not solo flying this thing, is what creates margin, no matter what we're in, no matter what situation we're in. Is that, hold on, I'm not alone here. Okay, this is hectic. I don't know how I'm going to pay the bills. I'm dealing with sick parents and people dying, and this is all too much for me. Lucky I'm not alone. Look to my left and my right, and that I'm aware that I'm not alone, even though I am not coping. God is with me. And He given me far too much freedom as far as I'm concerned, because He should have stepped in ages ago and sorted this out, of course. But when I remove myself from that conversation, that awareness, wow, I'm snapping, I'm going, and that is not, doesn't take long to go from one place to the other. Once we sort of isolate ourselves from the awareness and the knowledge that in the midst of it all, God is with me and around me, I'm pretty snappy. Wow.
When you talk like that, I know that for me, I can relate to it really quite strongly, and I do think that the struggle that we have, and I think it's a legitimate struggle. I don't think that any person maintains this perpetual sense of value and worth and high emotional well-being and all this kind of stuff. I just don't think it works. But one of the things that makes us human and gives us the ability to engage with this conflict, this kind of dichotomy that we have between the person I want to be and the person I'm expressing, is this thing of self-awareness. And there's a great story in the Bible where the prodigal son, we call him the prodigal son, he takes his inheritance, and he comes to a moment in life where he says to himself, my father's servants have it better than this. And that's that moment of self-awareness. And I think for me, one of the things that I have to kind of grasp or fight for in the midst of dealing with the normal pandemic stuff of sanitizations and masks and all that, and the risk of being in public spaces and that kind of stuff, as well as the normal pressures of life. For me, those are the things that really have contributed towards trying to be self-aware, trying to actually step aside, look at myself, and say, well, what's going on in your head and your heart?
Absolutely. I think that the definition of repentance is, I've heard there's many nuances to that. A turning around, change your direction, not just a condemning, but it also a thinking about your thinking. Like, if I keep thinking the same way, am I going to keep going the same way? So I'm not thinking correctly, almost. I am not engaging with reality in the most productive way, in a good way. So in a very practical sense, there's that. And I think that you need the reflection to say, okay, this isn't working. Am I just going to keep hammering away here? I like, again, Dallas Willard's take on, if at first you don't succeed, try again. He says that's really not very conducive to getting where you want to go. He says if people are developing rockets at NASA or whatever, and they blow up, they don't just say, well, wheel another one on there. No, they're doing a full analysis of what went wrong. So if at first you don't succeed, work out what you did wrong this time. I mean, there may still be other challenges. Yeah. And then try again, And I think that it's not just, white knuckling it. We're trying to, as people, evolve, both on earth, I suppose, here with, and then if we are eternal beings, that this is a journey that really goes on. and for eternity. Like I have no concept of that really. Some days it feels like I've been alive for a long time, and so I don't know what eternity is going to feel like. But I'm sure it'll have slightly different trials and tribulations to the earthly ones, because there are times you go, wow, this is hectic, eh? This is hectic. I've actually, in the last month or so, you mentioned that my father-in-law passed away, and we're not really sure. It was isolated at the time, but he was fairly elderly. Lisa got COVID, and we were dealing with that, and I wasn't sure how bad that was. We were self-isolating. And then a couple of weeks ago, my mother actually had a stroke, but it took us a while to find out what had happened there, and because it was on both sides of her brain. And thank the Lord that she's managing through that incredibly well at the moment. But as well as kids, and just it just felt like, oh, just another day. Oh, okay, here's another day. Almost like I wasn't even shocked. It's like I woke up this morning and said, well, has a rampaging, escaped rhino run through my pool. I don't know if anything's going to surprise me right now. And I think probably a lot of you out there, if you're listening, are feeling a bit like that. Like, what's next?
And I wonder how we engage with that, because I know for me it feels as if you're playing that. Is it the Hungry Hippo game? Or where you squash the.
Oh yes.
What's going to stick its neck out next that you're now going to whack down?
Whack-a-mole, I think.
Whack-a-mole, or one of those type of. I remember years ago when my kids were small, going to the mall and playing that game and getting a lot of satisfaction.
Let me help you, kids.
Just stick the head up and I score points for getting this. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
so,
that's right.
One of the things I've always gone through cycles and how I cope with these things. I don't have a one way to do this stuff. And a little while ago, I found myself just having opportunity to be silent. To sit and be still and just be quiet and become conscious of presence. God's presence, my presence in His presence, as it were, to try and fill the because when you talk about what next kind of thing is that because we've become hardened, or we just become tough? And there's a difference, isn't there? I mean, being hardened is I remain unemotional, unattached, whereas becoming strong is that I embrace this new challenge with a sense of hope and a sense of faith and a sense of, well, God, you're going to do something through this circumstance. Because I think some people become hardened as opposed to becoming strengthened.
I think that the path there is very narrow.
Yeah.
For me, is that you just be aware of the signs.
Yeah.
For me, shortness of. Sometimes you just need help too, you need to discuss it. It's incredible sometimes I'm on a hair trigger emotionally, and almost like this existential, you can get to this sort of existential angst. For those of you who know anything about that, it's like, what's the point? What's the point? We're overfishing the seas. The earth is heating up. And even if we get past that, eventually our sun is going to turn into a white dwarf and explode, and then which is maybe precisely why if you have no faith in an ultimate being who cares and loves us, that it's hard to be positive. Because at the end of the day, no one's going to remember your deeds. Doesn't matter how many hospitals you build, your name will turn to dust. That it doesn't actually matter. And yet, what I find comforting is God's view, and certainly through Jesus, of what it means to be human. That ultimately it's a very positive thing, that it's not a selfish thing, but it matters. It actually matters. We get to do something worthwhile.
I've definitely had some of that existential processing lately. Honestly, Christine and I have a code word that's called Thelma and Louise.
Just to drive the car off the cliff, is that?
Have a great time. See if you can catch me. And you're never going to have the satisfaction of being caught. Yes. But
is that you've decided we are gonna. live life like this was the last week or the last month or the last year of your lives or whatever.
No, that's where I don't want to be. I don't want to be. People say you're going to live life like it's your last day.
Rock and roll,
well, if it was, I understand that. I understand the intent behind that, and that is to try. I do think though I think there's an honourable thought to that, and you touched on it about being human, which for me is a trigger. When you say being human, I ask, well, what does that mean? And my struggle and my battle, and I think the war that I have to fight in terms of a spiritual, existential war that I have to fight is this idea that although I have union with God and I have union with people, the third aspect to being human and the legacy play is not for people to remember when I'm gone, but it's for now, and that is to be generative. To live a generative life, a life that gives life, a life that says there's space for life, that there's more to life. And I think that's my battle. My battle is to, in a sense, to be a blessing, to try to find some way to add value to somebody else. I think for me, that's the generative, what I'm looking for. And, just to try and be in a space where you've been kind, where you've been, and I know it sounds trite, some of the stuff, but honestly, for me, that's what I'm fighting to maintain without becoming cynical and angry at the political shenanigans that are happening, not just in South Africa, but beyond our borders.
Yeah, because where's the gold, really? That's, where does the gold live? Jim Carrey, he's an actor and comedian. He's very publicly said, I wish everyone could get everything they desired, sort of from the career point of view, so they could see that there's really very little there. And I think that often the things we strive for, independence, wealth, accumulation of whatever, even children, houses, status, acknowledgement for being clever, for being gifted, whatever that is, it often underdelivers. And yet the goal, the surprise is the small moments where you smile, you recognize, you acknowledge the humanity of others, and this is stuff that often over delivers in the moment. It's like a surprise. It seems to be where God is more. Other stuff we obviously need. I like that the passage in Matthew where Jesus said, God already knows what you need. He knows you need to eat and drink and stuff. Don't worry. God is not unaware of that. So don't worry about that. There's there's other stuff. Be aware of the gold. So where is the gold in your life, and where are you able to share that gold with people? And it starts again with an acknowledgement that other people are quite interesting, actually. They can be.
Yeah.
They're just not a commodity to use to get what you need. We call them bums on seats in our business. Bums on seats, baby, because we want the cash. That means we want the money from the bums on seats to be able to keep living and so on. I mean, I'm sure there's a more polite term in church world, but
no, it's about the same.
Whatever. But those are people, Yeah. And we performed last night to like one of the smallest crowds I've ever performed to. It's the first weekend performing again.
Yeah.
And literally I had so much fun. It was literally being in my lounge, and I chatted to everyone in that audience.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? At least I had a ball.
Yeah.
Because it's an opportunity to rekindle and recapture some of the I didn't get involved in performing or theatre to make money. It became a nice way later to be able to live doing what I enjoyed. But somewhere along the line, the joy gets stolen from you because you get wrapped up in all the other stuff. And it's sometimes nice to recalibrate and go, how great is it that I was here? And we had fun. We had real joy together. So that's a simple story. But I think that the gold, where is the gold when you are just living day to day? And how do you share that? Yeah.
So as we kind of wrap up, I think that's a really good place to wrap up. I know that Christine, out of the whole Lectio Divina kind of sort of reflective form of expressing faith, kind of you look back on the day and you ask yourself, well, in what conversation today
Oh, right.
Was
Yeah.
God clearly there? What conversations today, not was God not there, but maybe I could have done better. And dig the gold out of that kind of, and it is in the small things. Life is really a series of small events that has the occasional exponential kind of moment.
Yes.
And I think that people who are driven, people who are goal oriented, sometimes miss that. Unless we have the big thing, and I felt such delight as you were saying that you had one of the smallest crowds, and instead of being despaired about it, you almost said it was like having people in my lounge, and it was more intimate, and
Yes.
and listen, there are bills to pay, and there's those realities. But I do think if we can keep perspective and fight for it, because that's the fight we've got to fight for. The fight is perspective, and to find where God is in it. I don't know if you've got any thoughts.
Yes, just finally, in terms of the impending doom around things, the author of The Shack, I can't think of his name right now, a very interesting guy, very interesting life, and one of his real fears was to be sort of destitute financially. It was a perpetual fear, and a very clever, very intellectual guy, very well read and so on. But he got to a situation in his life where he'd lost everything. He had no money, and he said that there's no cure for the fear of poverty like being broke, because you face it and you go, I got here, I thought this was the end, but it was actually the beginning. And sometimes where we think we're falling to is actually a better place. Sometimes we've just been holding on to a place that we actually weren't that happy with. I know I have. And just that release of saying, I surrender to you, Lord, to this moment, that this may be a new reality. Often that reality has unexpected joy if we're prepared to sometimes be sort of a willing participant. And I think a lot of us are in that space where we're changing. We're going to a new reality, and we allow God, because he's gone ahead of us. He says, I'll go ahead. I go ahead to prepare, not only in heaven, but on earth. So we feel that presence, and that we can trust him, that no matter how rocky it feels, that in the end, God is, he is ever present, and he doesn't let us down. And I've lived that reality, even though I've been complaining that God has been incredibly faithful through this season for me. And whoever's listening out there, I would just ask you to lean into that and say, Lord, wherever we're going, I feel like I'm barely holding on. Even if things change, the Lord will be wherever you end. So I hope that speaks to you.
Brilliant. Thanks, Oren.
Thanks, Mark.
God bless.